have spoken to so many African heads of state and government and foreign ministers in the last 10 or 15 years. They admire China. They're grateful to China for the generosity of Chinese aid. But they do not think the Chinese model is replicable in their society. Inspiring, but utterly foreign to them.
But not for
them.
They
cannot be China. They cannot try to be like China. They look at India and they say, now there's a mess just like us. We can triumph over these problems. We can learn from them. This is the message I'm getting considered. They don't believe they can learn from China. And I don't agree with Martin.
Fuck them all. The world's full of cunts. I'm seeing red must be my time of the month. Look, when I bitch and rant, they just shit their pants. So they fix a plan for when it switches up.
Why is democracy relevant? China, what happens is everything is a top-down repressive system. It's like a limousine of states that's going on cruise control on a 6-lane expressway. What happens if it suddenly hits an unexpected pothole? If suddenly the politics gets out of control, if there's serious dissent, if there's serious unrest politically, India, the system allows you to find ways out. The pressure cooker has a safety valve. In China, we're not sure there is one. And Kim Jong-un probably is looking, for example, at Saddam Hussein's experience, is saying this guy boasted about weapons of mass destruction and he got overthrown by the Americans for his pains. Let me show them I have weapons of mass destruction and they won't dare to overthrow me. In some ways, therefore, what he's doing with all of this is saying, don't try and overthrow me because the price you'll have to pay is far too high to pay. San Francisco isn't too far away either, folks. So do you want to play that kind of hardball with me? Or will you leave me alone to be myself? So what I'm trying to say is maybe we'll have to live with a nuclear North Korea. As Tom Lehrer said in the famous lyric, the Lord's our shepherd, says the psalm, but just in case, we better have a bomb.
Give up on my way home, yeah. Hey, wouldn't it be crazy? Hey, can't you still amaze me?
British aid to India is about 0.4% of India's GDP. The government of India actually spends more on fertilizer subsidies, which might be an appropriate metaphor for that argument. If I may point out as well, the notes I was scribbling while they were speaking, there was reference to democracy and rule of law. Let me say with the greatest possible respect, it's a bit rich to oppress, enslave, kill, torture, maim people for 200 years and then celebrate the fact that they're democratic at the end of it.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
In your opinion, where would India be today if the British did not step into India?
Was it just modernism, the Industrial Revolution that destroyed it, or was it something else?
No, that's the excuse that apologists like to make, that, oh, it's not our fault, you just missed the bus for the Industrial Revolution. Well, we missed the bus because you threw us under its wheels, is what I tell the Brits. I mean, the fact is...
What we do here is go back.
29 million Indians died of starvation in British-induced famine. People died because Winston Churchill deliberately proceeded to divert essential supplies from civilians in Bengal to sturdy Tommies and Europeans as reserve stockpiles. He said that the starvation of anyway underfed Bengalis mattered much less than that of sturdy Greeks. Churchill's conduct in 43 simply one example of many that gave a lie to this myth. As others have said on the proposition, violence and racism were the reality of the colonial experience. And no wonder that the sun never set on the British Empire, because even God couldn't trust the English in the dark. The fact that Britain came to one of the richest countries in the world in the early 18th century and reduced it after 200 years of plunder to one of the poorest.
But
all
you
of
see,
that is really not known anymore.
Is it a British problem or an Indian problem?
No, I think it is a British problem. The fact that you don't really teach colonial history in your schools. Children doing A levels in history don't learn a line of colonial history. There's no real awareness of the atrocity. People have largely forgotten it, and Indians are very good at forgiving and forgetting, so they're forgotten as well, which is what I object to. Let them forgive, but let them not forget. And the British had the gall to call him Clive of India, as if he belonged to the country, when all he really did was to ensure that much of the country belonged to him. By the Clive bought their rotten boroughs in England on the proceeds of their loot in India, while taking the Hindi word loot into their dictionaries as well as their habits.
The world's full of cunts. I'm seeing red must be my time of the month. Look, when I bitch and rant, they just shit their pants, so they fix a plan for when it switches up.
Now, when I say globalization is everywhere, commonplace headlines seem to reek of globalization. Headlines just a little over a decade ago about the tragic death of Princess Diana. What's that got to do with globalization, you may ask? An English princess with a Welsh title leaves a French hotel with an Egyptian companion who has supplanted a Pakistani. She gets into a German car with a Dutch engine that is driven by a Belgian chauffeur full of Scottish whiskey. They're then chased by Italian paparazzi on Japanese scooters and motorbikes into a Swiss-built tunnel where they crash. A rescue is briefly attempted by an American doctor using Brazilian medicines, and the whole story is told to you in Boston by the Indian MP from Thiruvananthapuram. That's globalization.
Fingers down my spine. Girl, you look mighty fine. Won't you rub your fingers down my spine? Girl, you look mighty fine. Won't you rub your fingers down my spine?
Standing here with 8 minutes in my hands and at this venerable and rather magnificent institution, I was going to assure you that I belong to the Henry VIII School of Public Speaking. That, as Henry VIII said to his wives, I shall not keep you long. But it seemed a rather long evening to you. I rather feel like Henry VIII's last wife. I more or less know what's expected of me, but I'm not sure how to do it any differently. That the economic situation of the colonies was actually worsened by the experience of British colonialism. Well, I stand to offer you the Indian example, Sir Richard. Share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Why? Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain.
I'm laughing because my motherfucking life is a mess, but I've made it. And I wouldn't trade it, cause I stay faded. Fucking all the bitches till it look like we related.